Walter Chauncey Camp was an American football player, coach, and sports writer known as the father of American football. Camp was born in the city of New Britain, Connecticut, the son of Leverett Lee and Ellen Sophia Camp. Walter Camp was of English descent. His first immigrant ancestor was English colonist Nicholas Camp, who came from Essex, England, and arrived in colonial New England in 1630, arriving first in Massachusetts, then moving to Connecticut that same year. At Yale, Walter Camp was a member of Delta Kappa Epsilon fraternity, the Linonian Society, and Skull and Bones. Yes, he was a bonesman. He attended Yale Medical School from 1880 to 1883, where his studies were interrupted first by an outbreak of typhoid fever, then went to work for the Manhattan Watch Company. On June 30th, 1888, Camp married Alice Graham Sumner, sister of sociologist William Graham Sumner. He, Sumner, was elected to the Phi Beta Kappa Society in his junior year and in his senior year to the secretive Skull and Bones Society. So his brother-in-law was also a bonesman. Sumner avoided being drafted to fight in the American Civil War by paying a substitute, $250 given to him by a friend, to enlist for 3 years. This and money given to him by his father and friends allowed Sumner to go to Europe for further studies. How much better than fighting in the Civil War? Sumner believed that man could not abolish the law of survival of the fittest, and that humans could only interfere with it, and in doing so produce the unfit. Sumner was a critic of natural rights, famously arguing before the tribunal of nature, a man has no more right to life than a rattlesnake. He has no more right to liberty than any wild beast. His right to pursuit of happiness is nothing but a license to maintain the struggle for existence. William Graham Sumner, Earth, Hunger, and Other Essays, page 234. One of Sumner's most famous quotations neatly highlights his social Darwinist views. A drunkard in the gutter is just where he ought to be, according to the fitness and tendency of things. Nature has set upon him the process of decline and dissolution, by which she removes things which have survived their usefulness. According to Richard P. Borkowski, Camp was instrumental, through his extensive writing and lectures, in attaching an almost mythical atmosphere of manliness and heroism to the game not previously known in American team sport. By the age of 33, 12 years after graduating from Yale, Walter Camp had already become known as the father of football. In a column in the popular magazine, Harper's Weekly, sports columnist Caspar Whitney applied the nickname, the sobriquet, was applied because, by 1892, Camp had almost single-handedly fashioned the game of modern American football. Wholesale attacks upon football in the fall of 1892, on the grounds of brutality, led to a strong demand from the public for the abolition of the game. Football had been discontinued at West Point and Annapolis and abolished at Harvard for 1 year. Strong demands for the abolition of football from the public continued. However, in 1905, President Theodore Roosevelt summoned Walter Camp and representatives from Harvard and Princeton to the White House and impressed upon them the necessity of meeting the public's reaction to football. For over 10 years, there had been periodic outcry against the roughness and brutality and a demand for reform. Now the outcry swept across the country. The casualty list for the 1905 season was fearful. 18 had died, and there were 149 serious injuries. Walter Camp led a double life. Athletes and college men were proud to point to him as their inspiration and example, and businessmen hailed him as equally luminous in their sphere as head of New Haven Clock Company, one of the largest manufacturing concerns in Connecticut at the time. His interests were on the financial side and selling side rather than in the factory. Few college men knew that Camp had a business side, and the businessmen who didn't read the sporting pages had no idea that he was extensively involved in athletics. With his strong interest in anatomy, Camp entered Yale Medical School in the fall of 1880. After 2 years and passing all but 2 subjects for the MD degree, he left school noting in a biographical questionnaire that the death of a surgeon with whom I had expected to practice medicine caused me to leave the medical school and go into business. Upon leaving medical school, Walter Camp joined the sales department of the Manhattan Watch Company in New York City. After a year, he was employed as a salesman in the New York office of the New Haven Clock Company. He steadily progressed through the selling into the export department and thence to the position of assistant treasurer in the New Haven main office. He became treasurer and general manager in 1902, president in 1903, and finally chairman of the board. On September 29, 1914, the following was printed in the most conspicuous place on the editorial page of the New York American newspaper. Americans Awake by Walter Camp. Guard your shores and train your men, teach your growing youth to fight. Make your plans ere once again ships of foes appear in sight. Teach new arts until you hold in your bounds all thing you need. Then you can't be bought or sold, from commercial bonds be freed. If Manhattan rich you'd save, if your western golden gate, train a field force, rule the wave, every day your tempting fate. Build the ships and train to arms, make your millions fighting strength, that shall frighten war's alarms, ere they reach a challenge length. In April 1917, just 2.5 years later, he started the Senior Service Corps in New Haven. The Corps stressed physical fitness for men whose age was beyond that of active military service. The members devoted an hour a day, 3 days a week, to training consisting of setting up drills 15 minutes and marching 45 minutes. The Senior Service Corps quickly became a national movement with President Wilson as an honorary president. During the strenuous days which followed entry into World War I, Camp was assigned the difficult task of keeping the overworked members of Wilson's cabinet and other high government officials in good physical condition. This group came to be known as the Walter Scamps, and included Frank L. Polk, John W. Davis, Thomas N. Gregory, Franklin K. Lane, Daniel Roper, Paul Warburg, William Wilson, Louis Post, Oscar Crosby, Byron Newton, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Edwin F. Street, Daniel Willard, and Eustace Percy, among others. Some months later, Camp was put in charge of the physical development in all training camps of the U.S. Navy. He was also made a physical director of the United States Air Service. On the sometimes strained Yale-Harvard athletics relations, Harvard alumni correspondents included Professor James Barr, Ames, of the Harvard Law School, Lebaron R. Briggs, Dean of Harvard College, President of Radcliffe College, Lauren Delland, a Boston attorney who collaborated with Camp on the book, football, a Forbes, a prominent businessman in Boston, and let's skip to among the Yale alumni with whom Camp corresponded on general athletics were Eugene Lamb Richards, professor of mathematics, director of the Yale Gymnasium, and author of articles on Yale athletics, and Samuel J. Elder, prominent Boston lawyer and president of the Boston Bar Association, whose letters brought news of athletics at Harvard. The subject of physical fitness, in which Camp had a lifelong interest, led to correspondence with prominent political figures in Washington, including Newton D. Baker, Josephus Daniels, John W. Davis, Franklin K. Lane, William McAdoo, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Daniel C. Roper, and John Tilson in connection with the founding of the Senior Service Corps. Through these political contacts, he corresponded with many government departments on this subject, including the Departments of Agriculture, Commerce, Labor, Navy, the Interior, Treasury and War, and the Tariff Commission. Locally in New Haven, where the Senior Service Corps was founded, Camp kept in contact with two men who provided the leadership for the Corps, President William Howard Taft and Colonel Isaac M. Ullman, president of the New Haven Chamber of Commerce. Okay, let's fast forward to a couple years ago. A report released Wednesday criticized the Department of Defense for spending millions in sports marketing contracts and called to task the professional sports teams that took the money. saying they were engaged in paid patriotism. Prepared by senators, the report found that all military branches reported spending $53 million on marketing and advertising contracts with professional sports organizations between 2012 and 2015. A September 14th memo from the Undersecretary of Defense office said that a review of sports marketing and advertising contracts revealed some areas of concern that could give rise to the perception that the department has paid for patriotism. Sports marketing and advertising is too important to the recruiting mission to allow these perceptions to detract from our message, the letter said. Our actions must be transparent and our intent consistently focused on our mission, sustaining the all-volunteer force. So yes, admitted here on the last paragraph that yes, football is preparing and recruiting the population to be meat shields for the United States Empire, which it always has had that purpose. So if you don't understand, this guy's connection to Skull and Bones, you get a great philosophical understanding from his brother-in-law of his view about life. I'm sure he shared some of these thoughts as a bonesman. And just the overall highest echelons of power he was involved with at the time suggests to me that this was a plan put in place to train the men to be ready for war if they needed. So they wouldn't need to go to boot camp or whatever if they had already had 4 years of football or whatever. I don't know. But if you're talking to the Wilson's cabinet of World War I, there's obviously something else going on there. He's not just a football coach.